Have you ever noticed how the days seem to slip through your fingers faster with every passing year? What if the anxiety you feel about time slipping away is actually what prevents you from fully living the time you have right now? If you have ever felt exhausted by the speed of life, or caught yourself looking back with a quiet, heavy ache in your chest, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson may change the way you see this pain forever. 1. The anxiety of accelerating time. Here is the truth few people want to face. The harder you try to hold on to a moment, the faster it seems to fade. As we grow older, time begins to feel like a runaway train. We wake up, and suddenly another month has vanished. We look at the calendar and wonder where the seasons went. There is a deep, quiet panic that sets in when we realize we cannot slow down the clock. We find ourselves trapped in a cycle of rushing to finish our daily tasks, rushing to the next milestone, rushing to find a quiet moment of rest that never truly arrives. And in this endless rushing, a strange anxiety takes root. We feel a haunting sense of nostalgia for moments that have barely just passed, and a persistent fear of the moments yet to come. We worry that we are running out of time, that we are missing out, that life is rushing by while we are just trying to keep our heads above water. Buddhist wisdom teaches us about the undeniable reality of impermanence. Everything in this physical world is in a state of constant motion. The suffering we feel as time speeds up does not actually come from time itself. It comes from our fierce resistance to it. We suffer because we want the temporary to become permanent. We suffer because we are living in the ghost of yesterday or the anxiety of tomorrow, rather than resting softly in the reality of today. Imagine a handful of dry, fine sand. If you hold it gently in your open palm, it rests peacefully. You can admire it, feel its weight, and hold it without losing a single grain. But the moment you become afraid of the wind blowing it away, the moment you clench your fist tightly to keep it safe, the sand begins to slip rapidly through the spaces between your fingers. The harder you squeeze, the faster it empties from your hand, until nothing is left but the tension in your grip. This is exactly how we treat our lives. We feel the heavy pressure of birthdays passing, of loved ones growing older, of phases ending, and we panic. We squeeze our hands tightly. We try to capture and freeze every moment instead of letting it breathe. We replay old conversations and obsess over past versions of ourselves, wishing we could step back into a time when things felt simpler, safer, or more certain. We become so fixated on the speed of the journey that we forget to simply sit and look out the window. Ask yourself, what are you desperately trying to hold on to right now? What chapter of your life are you quietly refusing to close? Are you carrying a hidden fear that your best days are behind you, or that time is running out to finally find your peace? Stop. Breathe. Let that sink in. You are not powerless against the flow of time. You do not have to fight the clock. You only have to inhabit this single breath. The present moment is the only place where time stands still. When we make peace with the fact that nothing lasts forever, we stop grieving the passing of time and start experiencing the profound depth of it. But letting go of our tight grip on time is only the first step, because the mind has a clever, quiet way of tricking us into looking backward, trapping us in an illusion of what used to be. And this is where the next truth begins. 2. The hidden trap of nostalgia. What if the warmth of your favorite memories is actually what is keeping you out in the cold? Here is a truth that is difficult to swallow. We often suffer not because our present is deeply painful, but because we are quietly addicted to a past that no longer exists. Nostalgia is a powerful, seductive force. It paints our history in golden light, softening the edges of the difficult days and magnifying the joy of the good ones. We look backward and feel a bittersweet longing, a deep yearning for a time when we felt more secure, more loved, or simply younger. But this sweet longing is often a hidden trap. Consider a quiet psychological thought experiment. What if the emotion of nostalgia was completely removed from the human experience? Imagine a reality where the mind was simply incapable of romanticizing yesterday. In this world, without the heavy pull of nostalgia, people would not spend their evenings mourning the passage of seasons. They would not lose hours scrolling through old photographs, desperately wishing to feel a past emotion just one more time. Without nostalgia, we might lose a certain romantic sentimentality, but we would gain an absolute, unbreakable anchor to the present. We would no longer compare the quiet reality of today to the exaggerated perfection of a memory. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that attachment takes many forms. We do not just attach to physical possessions or to outcomes, we attach to versions of ourselves that have already expired. When we cling to nostalgia, we turn a beautiful passing cloud into a heavy stone. The past is a completed chapter. It is meant to be a teacher, not a residence. But when time seems to move too quickly, our instinct is to retreat into what is familiar. Imagine you are in a small boat, moving slowly across a vast, quiet lake. If you sit facing backward, you can only see the water you have already crossed. You watch the ripples fade, mesmerized by the wake you leave behind. You remember how smooth the water was miles ago, but because your eyes are locked on what is behind you, you do not see the currents shifting ahead. You do not see the beautiful vast horizon opening up in front of you. You are moving forward, but your spirit is trapped facing backward. We do this in our modern lives constantly. We replay old conversations, hoping the outcome will change in our minds. We romanticize the ease of our earlier years, while ignoring the quiet strength we have built today. We feel anxious and behind in life because we are measuring our current, messy reality against a frozen, perfect memory that never actually existed exactly as we remember it. Ask yourself, are you using a memory as an escape from your present? Is there a past version of your life that you are secretly holding up as the standard for your happiness today? What are you afraid to face right here, right now, that makes the past seem so much safer? Pause, breathe, observe the memory without trying to live inside it. You can appreciate the beauty of a sunset without trying to pull the sun back into the sky. You do not need to abandon your memories, but you must stop demanding that they return. Honor what was, but refuse to let it consume what is. Because peace is not found by walking backward, it is found by accepting the flow of the water. And this brings us to a beautiful truth about the way life actually moves. 3. The truth of the flowing river. What if your exhaustion comes not from how fast life is moving, but from how hard you are swimming against the current? Here is the truth few people want to face. We spend most of our lives trying to build permanent houses on a bridge that was only meant for walking across. When the years start to accelerate and life begins to shift rapidly, our immediate instinct is to seek control. We try to freeze the people around us into the versions we are most comfortable with. We try to lock our circumstances in place. We grip onto familiar routines, even when they no longer serve us, simply because they are known. We feel the terrifying speed of life, and we respond by frantically trying to build walls to stop the flow of time. But this resistance does not slow time down. It only creates a deep, agonizing friction in our hearts. In Buddhist thought, this friction is the very root of our suffering. We suffer because we mistake the fluid for the solid. We demand permanence in a universe that is entirely defined by impermanence. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that life is not a fixed destination, it is a continuous, unbroken movement. When we fight this movement, we suffer. Peace is found not by controlling the flow, but by practicing non-attachment. It is the profound realization that you can experience the beauty of the water without needing to own it. Imagine standing waist-deep in a powerful, rushing river. If you plant your feet into the stones at the bottom and try to stop the water by pushing against it with your bare hands, you will be relentlessly battered. The water will crash into your chest, exhausting your muscles and bruising your spirit. You will feel as though the river is actively attacking you, trying to tear you down. But the river has no malice. It does not hate you. It is simply doing what rivers must do, flowing toward the ocean. The moment you stop fighting, the moment you lean back and lift your feet, the violent struggle vanishes. The very same water that was bruising you will now carry you forward effortlessly. We plant our feet in the river of our lives every single day. We try to force someone to stay when their season in our life has clearly ended. We fight bitterly against the reality of getting older. We struggle against the sudden shift in a career path, the loss of a familiar friendship, or the painful silence of being ignored by someone we used to know well. We exhaust ourselves trying to free the water in place, terrified of where the current might take us. We believe that if we just push hard enough, we can make things stay exactly as they were. Think about your own life. Where are you planting your feet right now? What natural transition are you fighting with all your remaining strength? Is this resistance actually keeping you safe, or is it just draining your soul? Pause. Breathe. Do your part, then release the outcome. Stop trying to force the water to be still. Let the feelings of uncertainty rise without making them your identity. You do not have to control every drop of the river to be safe in the water. You only have to trust that the current knows the way. Because peace is not something you achieve by conquering the river. It is what happens when you finally stop fighting it. But surrendering to the current requires a difficult choice. We must stop reaching for the places we have already left behind. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. The suffering of reopening closed doors. What if the most exhausting part of your journey is not the heavy road ahead, but the doors you keep turning backward to pry open? Here is a painful but necessary truth. Much of the anxiety we feel as time rushes forward comes from our refusal to leave things exactly where they belong in the past. When a relationship ends, when an opportunity fades, or when a phase of life quietly concludes, an invisible door closes. But instead of continuing down the hallway of our lives, we stop. We sit down in front of that closed door. We stare at the wood. We jiggle the handle, we knock softly at first, and then we pound our fists against it, demanding that it open just one more time. We tell ourselves we just want closure. We tell ourselves we simply need one last conversation, one more chance to make things right, one more look at what used to be. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that suffering is not caused by the closing of the door. The closing is simply the natural law of impermanence in motion. Everything has a season, and seasons must eventually change. The deep, lingering suffering is caused entirely by our refusal to walk away. Buddhism reminds us that when we desperately try to resurrect what has already naturally concluded, we are fighting reality itself. We suffer because we mistakenly believe that our happiness is permanently locked inside that old room, rather than waiting for us somewhere further down the path. Imagine walking through a grand, infinite hallway filled with hundreds of doors. You walk into a beautiful room, spend a meaningful season there, and eventually, it is time to leave. You step back into the hallway, and the door firmly clicks shut behind you. Now, imagine spending the rest of your journey sitting on the cold floor outside that locked room. You press your ear against the wood, listening for footsteps that are no longer there. You try every key on your ring, scraping the lock, exhausting your hands, and breaking your spirit. All around you, in this endless hallway, new doors are standing wide open. Sunlight is pouring out of them. A gentle breeze is calling you forward, but you cannot feel the warmth or see the light, because your back is turned to the future while you weep over a door that was locked for your own protection. This is what we do in our modern lives. when we cannot let go. We quietly check in on past loves or old friends on social media, looking through the digital keyhole of their lives. We reread old messages, trying to find a hidden meaning that might change a painful outcome. We wait endlessly for an apology from someone who has already shown us they cannot give it. We hold on to deep resentments, picking at old emotional wounds instead of allowing them to heal. We trap ourselves in a cycle of familiar pain simply because we are terrified of exploring the unknown hallway ahead. Ask yourself, which closed door are you still quietly knocking on? Are you waiting for a ghost to let you back in? What are you truly afraid will happen if you finally turn around and walk away? Stop. Breathe. Observe the urge without following it. Stop trying to force the door open. Let the heavy silence of the closed room be the only answer you need. You do not have to understand exactly why it locked to accept that it is time to move on. Because true closure is not a final conversation, and it is not an apology. Closure is simply your own quiet decision to stop knocking. But walking away from the door requires something profound. It requires learning how to look at yesterday without letting it steal today. And this is where the next truth begins. 5. How to honor what has passed. What if letting go does not mean forgetting, but simply changing the way you remember? Here is a quiet, heavy truth. We often fear that if we finally stop grieving the past, we are somehow betraying it. When a beautiful season ends, or a meaningful connection fades, there is a lingering guilt associated with moving on. We mistakenly believe that holding on to the pain of a loss proves the depth of its importance. We think that if we stop crying over what is gone, it means it never mattered. So, to prove that our history was real, we tightly grip the sorrow. We refuse to heal. We carry the heavy weight of old chapters on our shoulders, exhausting ourselves as the years accelerate, terrified that finding peace today means erasing yesterday. Buddhist wisdom teaches a beautiful truth about mindful acceptance. Non-attachment is never about cold indifference or forced amnesia. It does not demand that you erase your history or silence your heart. Instead, one of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is the ability to hold a memory with an open palm rather than a clenched fist. It is the practice of bowing to the past, acknowledging its profound role in shaping who you are, and then gently releasing it without bitterness. You can have deep gratitude for the light something brought into your life without demanding that it shine on you forever. Imagine a magnificent tree standing on the edge of a quiet forest. When the autumn wind arrives and the air grows cold, the tree does not violently cling to its golden leaves. It does not weep for the foliage that detaches and falls silently to the earth. But it also does not deny that the leaves were ever there. Those fallen leaves slowly return to the ground, nourishing the very soil that feeds the tree. They become the unseen foundation for the next spring. The tree honors the passing of the season simply by letting the leaves fall, trusting the deep, quiet roots that remain. In our lives, we often act as though we must tape the dead leaves back onto our branches. When we leave a home filled with childhood memories, when we outgrow a long-term friendship, or when we face the undeniable reality of our physical bodies aging, we panic. We feel the anxiety of time moving too fast, and we try to carry every single leaf from every past season in our arms. We exhaust ourselves by trying to keep the past alive, rather than allowing it to quietly become the soil that nourishes our present wisdom. We forget that the most beautiful way to honor a completed chapter is to live fully in the one that follows it. Think about your own life. Are you holding on to pain as a way of holding on to a memory? Do you secretly believe that if you finally allow yourself to find peace, it means the past did not matter? What would happen if you simply let the leaf fall to the ground? Pause, breathe, bow to the memory, and gently set it down. You can love what was while fully embracing what is. Let the experience shape you without allowing it to trap you. Because honoring the past is not about carrying its heavy weight forever. It is about letting it make you stronger for the road ahead. But to truly walk that road, we must first realize how often we are sleepwalking through the present moment. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. Waking up from the autopilot of life. What if the reason life feels like it is moving faster every year is simply because you are not fully awake to live it? Here is a quiet, startling truth. We often complain that time is slipping through our fingers, yet we spend the vast majority of our days entirely distracted. As we grow older, the novelty of life slowly fades into a rigid routine. We wake up, we follow our schedules, we look at our screens, we worry about our obligations, and we go to sleep. The days begin to blur together. A week becomes a month becomes a year, and suddenly we are struck by a deep, hollow anxiety. We wonder where the time went, but time did not speed up. It is simply that we were not present for it. We were physically moving through our days, but our minds were miles away, wandering endlessly through the anxieties of tomorrow or the regrets of yesterday. Buddhism reminds us that the only real time we ever possess is the eternal now. The past is a memory, and the future is an illusion. When we live on autopilot, we abandon the only space where life actually happens. Buddhist wisdom teaches that mindfulness is not a complicated, mystical achievement. It is simply the act of coming back to yourself. It is waking up from the heavy dream of distraction and choosing to inhabit the exact moment you are in, no matter how ordinary or quiet it may seem. Imagine walking through a vast, breathtaking garden filled with vibrant flowers and ancient, towering trees. But as you walk, you wear a heavy blindfold, and your mind is entirely consumed by a map of where you are supposed to go next. You walk for hours. You finally reach the exit gate, take off the blindfold, and feel a sudden, crushing disappointment. You realize the walk is over. You ask, why did that end so quickly? Where did the garden go? The garden was always there. The sweet fragrance was in the air. The warm sunlight was resting on your skin. But because you refused to open your eyes and experience the present, the journey felt like an empty, fleeting blur. We live this way constantly in our modern world. We drive home from work and pull into the driveway, entirely unable to remember the commute. We eat our meals while staring at glowing screens, swallowing without ever truly tasting the food. We sit in the same room with the people we deeply love, but our minds are silently consumed by the pressure to succeed, the fear of falling behind, or a meaningless conflict from 3 days ago. We feel exhausted and emotionally starved, not because time is cruel, but because we are absent. We are trading the sacred, unrepeatable reality of this exact second for a wandering, anxious mind. Ask yourself, how much of your life are you actually awake for? Are you secretly trading your todays for an imaginary tomorrow? When was the last time you simply sat in a room and noticed the world happening around you without trying to change it? Stop, breathe, feel your feet on the ground. Pull your mind back from the future. Call it back from the past. You do not need to do anything spectacular to make your life meaningful today. You only need to be here for it. Because time does not steal our lives from us. We surrender our lives by simply not paying attention. But waking up is only the beginning of the journey. Once our eyes are open, we must learn how to anchor ourselves in the quiet. And this is where the next truth begins. 7. Anchoring yourself in the present pause. What if the constant noise you surround yourself with is exactly what is keeping you exhausted? Here is a truth that is deeply uncomfortable for the modern mind. We are terrified of stillness. When we feel the heavy anxiety of accelerating time, our instinct is not to slow down, but to frantically match its pace. We fill every empty space in our day with tasks, obligations, and distractions. We walk with voices playing in our ears. We leave the television running in an empty room just to avoid the weight of the quiet. We reach for our glowing screens the very second we are forced to wait. We believe that if we just keep moving, keep consuming, and keep planning, we can somehow outrun the creeping fear that our lives are passing us by. But the faster we move, the more disconnected we become. We exhaust our spirits trying to escape the only thing that can actually heal us, the pause. In Buddhist thought, stillness is not an empty void. It is a profound and active presence. It is the sacred space where clarity finally emerges. Buddhist wisdom teaches that when the mind is constantly agitated by frantic movement, it cannot see reality clearly. We suffer because we refuse to let the waters of our mind settle. We believe that peace is a destination we have to sprint toward, when in reality, peace is what naturally rises to the surface the moment we finally stop running. Imagine a clear glass jar filled with pure water and dark, heavy river dirt. When the jar is constantly shaken, the dirt swirls violently. The water becomes murky, chaotic, and impossible to see through. If you want the water to become clear again, you cannot reach inside and force the dirt down with your hands. You cannot shake the jar in a different direction. You cannot yell at the water to be clean. The only way to find clarity is to set the jar down on a quiet table, step back, and simply leave it alone. If you give it the gift of stillness, the heavy dirt will naturally sink to the bottom on its own, and the water will become perfectly transparent. We are constantly shaking the jar of our own minds. We feel the pressure of the years passing, and we react by shaking the jar even harder. We overbook our schedules to avoid feeling the sting of loneliness. We scroll endlessly to numb the quiet ache of feeling behind in life. We replay painful conversations and obsess over future outcomes, constantly stirring up the emotional dirt. We are desperately trying to think our way out of overthinking. We are trying to rush our way into inner peace. Ask yourself, what are you quietly avoiding when you refuse to sit in silence? What uncomfortable truth or hidden fear do you think will rise to the surface if you finally stop shaking the jar? Are you truly running out of time, or are you just running away from yourself? Pause. Breathe. Set the jar down. Let the heavy feelings settle without trying to fix them or fight them. You do not have to solve every problem today. You only need to be brave enough to sit in the quiet and let the stillness hold you. Because peace is not something you chase, it is something you make space for. But to truly make space, we must learn to stop fighting the reality of where we currently stand. And this is where the next truth begins. 8. Making peace with the season you are in. What if the reason you feel so exhausted is because you are demanding a summer harvest in the middle of a quiet winter? Here is a painful contradiction we carry. As the years pass and time seems to speed up, we develop a deep, agonizing fear of falling behind. We look at our age, our career, our relationships, and we hold them up to an invisible timeline. If we are not where we thought we would be by now, panic sets in. We feel a crushing pressure to constantly bloom, to always be moving forward, building, and achieving. When life forces us into a quiet period, a time of healing, a transition, a sudden loss, or a period of profound waiting, we reject it. We treat this quiet phase as a failure. We fight fiercely against the reality of where we are, exhausting our spirits in a desperate attempt to force progress where there is currently only stillness. In Buddhist thought, this rejection of the present is a profound source of pain. Buddhism reminds us that the universe operates in natural, unbreakable cycles. There is a time for immense growth and a time for deep rest. There is a time for holding on and a time for letting go. When we refuse to accept the season we are in, we suffer. peace is not found by violently rushing your timeline. It is found through radical acceptance of what is happening right now, without judging it as wrong, late, or inadequate. Imagine an ancient oak tree in the dead of winter. Its branches are completely bare. The air is freezing, and the ground is hard. But the tree does not stand in the snow and weep because it has no leaves. It does not look at the evergreen trees nearby and feel a deep, quiet shame for being empty. It does not try to force a fragile green bud to push through the frost just to prove it is still alive. The tree knows that winter is not a punishment. The quiet, barren cold is exactly what allows the tree to send its energy deep underground, strengthening its roots in the dark. It rests, trusting perfectly that spring will arrive precisely when it is supposed to. In our modern lives, we rarely allow ourselves a winter. We experience a painful breakup, a job loss, or a sudden shift in our identity, and we immediately demand to feel entirely healed and successful again. We look at the glowing, curated lives of others, and we feel a deep shame about our own messy, unpolished reality. We try to force flowers out of frozen soil, and when it does not work, we believe we are broken. We forget that it is entirely okay to be in a season of quiet waiting. It is okay to be rebuilding. It is okay if the only thing you accomplished today was surviving the cold. Ask yourself, what season of life are you secretly punishing yourself for being in? Are you exhausting your mind by demanding a bright summer when your soul is quietly asking for the rest of winter? Who told you that you had to be blooming every single day to be worthy of peace? Pause, breathe, let life meet you where you are. Stop apologizing for your pace. Stop measuring your quiet days against someone else's loud victories. You are not behind in life. You are exactly where you need to be to learn the lessons required for your next chapter. Because true peace is not found by skipping to the end of the story. It is found by trusting the page you are currently on. But to fully trust the journey, we must completely change the way we interact with the river of time. And this is where the final truth begins. 9. Letting the current carry you forward. What if the speed of time was never meant to be a warning, but an invitation to finally stop fighting? We began this journey looking at a very familiar pain, that quiet, heavy panic that sets in when we realize another year has slipped away. We talked about the exhaustion of rushing, the sweet but dangerous trap of nostalgia, and the deep suffering of standing outside closed doors, begging for them to open just one more time. We have spent so much of our lives terrified of the clock, believing that if we just hold on tight enough, we can keep the people and the moments we love from changing. But here is the truth. The sand will always slip through a clenched fist. The dead leaves will always fall when winter arrives. And the river will always flow toward the ocean. The deep, agonizing anxiety you feel about time passing is simply the friction between the reality of impermanence and your persistent desire for control. You have exhausted your spirit trying to build permanent houses on a bridge that was only ever meant for walking across. You have worn yourself out trying to swim against a current that was actually trying to carry you toward a beautiful, unseen horizon. But you do not have to fight the water anymore. Buddhism reminds us that peace is not found by conquering time, but by fully waking up to the present moment. True non-attachment does not mean you stop loving the people and places of your past. It simply means you stop demanding that they stay exactly the same. You can honor every single completed chapter of your history without needing to read it over and over again. You can have profound gratitude for the closed doors, knowing they locked not as a punishment, but simply because you were meant to keep walking forward. Think about your life right now. Look at the invisible heavy bags you have been dragging behind you, the old regrets, the nostalgia for past versions of yourself, the invisible timeline you felt you failed to meet. What if you just set them down? Imagine standing in the river of your life one last time, But today, you are not planting your feet in the stones. You are not bracing your chest for impact. You are not looking over your shoulder at the water you have already passed. Instead, you simply take a deep breath, lean back, and lift your feet. You look up at the vast, open sky, and you let the water carry you. You realize that you are completely safe, not because you are in control of the river, but because you have finally surrendered to its flow. Pause, breathe, feel the quiet relief of that surrender. You do not have to chase what is already leaving. You do not need to force the next chapter to begin before its time. You only need to inhabit this single, unrepeatable breath. Trust that the quiet season you are in is exactly what you need. Trust that the beautiful memories you made are safely stored in your heart, and that the days ahead hold a light of their own. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.